Afternoon, everybody. I think introductions have been done. I'd just like to thank the speakers so far. I think you've made a great case for cybersecurity. Lots of people have mentioned it, so my job's almost done here today. But I'll go through anyway and just draw out some of the key themes. So. No cybersecurity presentation is complete without actually outlining the threat. And this slide here is just some headlines from very recent threat reports, all really go into showing the threat to certainly our industry, every industry in fact, and every walk of life is increasing. And I think that's a really obvious statement to make. You only have to turn on the news. You only have to probably look in your own email box to realise that there's somebody somewhere undergoing a cyber attack, or somebody's trying to exploit somebody. And that's no different in our own sector. I've been in this role for 5 years now, and I know that a couple of times a month we would have to respond to something urgently. I would say that's 3, 4, 5 times a week now. There's not a day I go into work in the morning, open your mail, and there isn't something in your email box about either an attack somewhere else or a vulnerability. So it's picking up pace, and where it really is picking up pace is we've always had targeting our industry sophisticated nation-state actors. They've not gone away, they won't go away, and they will always be there in the background. But the big concern now is criminals. It's become big business, cybersecurity. People are making a lot of money out of it. People are trying to legitimise ransomware by running it as a legitimate business model. I mean, that's ridiculous, but that's the message that's going out there. It is a multi-billion-pound industry that's growing and growing, and as system operators and as a business in our own right, we're fair targets. We've got the ability to pay, and the criminals have got the leverage against us if they manage to get control of our networks or even get control of our business systems. Most recently, Colonial Pipeline proved that, the disruption that caused in the US with fuel supplies. After that Colonial Pipeline, we managed it without a cyber attack, obviously, in the UK. But and really, we're either targets for direct exploitation, ransomware, or holding our information, or even holding the fact that they've got a hold on our networks over us. Can all be something that might make us pay them money to release our data or release that information. So just to illustrate the point, sorry if you can't read that, but it's a timeline I've maintained up until 2021 this year in terms of cyber attacks. And fortunately, I have been around long enough to remember the very first significant cyber attack on an ICS system in Australia. It was reasonably exciting for the industry at the time because it made a case for cybersecurity. It was if anybody remembers, a disgruntled employee infiltrated a SCADA system to release sewage into rivers, etc. So that was kind of a wake up call. But you can see a decade went by, almost a decade. And then Stuxnet came along. I think Stuxnet it's certainly in cybersecurity industry, but I think it's really well known. Stuxnet was the attack on the Iranian nuclear uranium enrichment program, and that was the first proper wake up call in terms of the sophistication and the lengths that a nation state will go to infiltrate networks for their gain and for their benefit. And I think certainly from our perspective as an electricity industry, we go 5 years later, Ukraine, the Ukraine grid was incidents. 3 years later, Trisis was a significant one. Been significant because it was the first, well, I'm told, the first publicly released attack that was actually designed to endanger life. So it was designed to disable safety systems on gas pipelines. A significant shift in the mode of operation there. I've already mentioned Colonial this year, but I think the picture I'm trying to say is we go a decade between attacks. Now we're going 2 a year, 3 a year in our industry. It's we're no longer having to wait or that long to see significant exploitation of ICS systems, and that trend is definitely set to continue. So moving away from threat and moving towards the subject I'm going to speak about, so a journey to net zero. So there's absolutely no doubt about the socio-economic and the environmental benefits that net zero brings, and we're certainly not bringing that into question. But with a cybersecurity lens on this, there's a flip side to digitalisation. That flip side is it opens up opportunities. An attacker is not going to see the economic benefit. An attacker's not going to see the benefit for society. They will see or will look for opportunity in that opportunity to extort cash, opportunity to cause disruption on that. So, for example, opening up data is a great lever for innovation across our industry. But if we're not careful, it's also a great way to innovate against us. And that's where an attacker's lens will be looking at. Increase the number of endpoints on our network, increasing our communications. I think certainly I can speak for Northern Power Grid, but over ED2, our endpoints and communications networks are going to increase by about 1,000%. So all of that increases the opportunities for attack. And again, look at it from the attacker's perspective. That's a way into the network. That's a way to disrupt our networks. Really makes a case that we need to consider cybersecurity as a key priority. So again, I'll be clear, it's certainly not a reason not to go on this journey to net zero, but we do need to make sure that our design strategy from our core systems, our communications, and our endpoints and cloud, we do need to take that design into account. Now, what is good is we don't have to make our case to the regulators to take this seriously. Government and regulators across the board understand the case for cybersecurity. They understand that it needs funding, and in fact are actually driving that case via new regulation. The NIS regulation, NISR, is making a big impact in all industries, telecommunications and energy, in making our operational systems much more secure. Data protection, information security. Ian said at the beginning, this is about information. This is about securing information. It's about securing our systems, but really we're looking at securing that information. So other standards, ISO 27001, new to the industry, 27019, and many other standards that we all voluntarily follow also go into making our transactions more secure. So I've just tried to simplify it a little bit because I like simple things, and especially in cybersecurity, and I'm just moving it towards comms now. There's many ways to look at it, but it's often looked at in what's called the CIA triangle. So basically, what we're trying to achieve on our comms networks, for example, is confidentiality, integrity of the data, and availability of the data. We've talked a lot today about availability. And if we remove a single one of those elements, our data rapidly becomes valueless, or at worst, as proven by attacks, dangerous, if we start using data that we can't rely on. So we've taken communications for granted, and I think we should take it for granted. But what we want to do is we want to put something in one end of our network, and we want it to come out at its destination. But when it comes to its destination, we don't want it to have been altered. We don't want another party to have seen that data, and actually we want it to come out the other end. So confidentiality, integrity and availability. Very much if we put a letter in the post, we want it to arrive at its destination, and we don't want somebody to have opened the envelope and read the letter in the middle. So that's really what we're trying to achieve. So when we consider the security of data in transit, then that data is becoming ever more important as we rely on it to operate our networks safely. We need to consider who we're exposing that data to. Do we know where that data's going? Do we know if that data can be intercepted along the way? Do we know if that data can be changed along the way? And what do we have in place to make sure that that data is available, or the communications network's available to carry that data? And it's been mentioned already, can we put contracts in place with our comms providers to provide us with that level of availability and integrity that we need? Okay, so moving on to that, I've simplified the choices here. We are set to see an unprecedented growth in the number of connected points, and we also have got to do this, and it's been said already, without increasing the risk to our consumers, our customers. We certainly can't go ahead on this journey and end up with something that risks ultimately the services we provide, in our case power supplies to our customers. So where does the spectrum policy come in with this one? Well, obviously in terms of private radio, yes, commercial and commercial comms has got a huge part to play in this, and I'm certainly not suggesting the commercial comms networks are wholly insecure. They come under similar regulation to we do, and we can put controls in place to make sure that we're protecting our data when we put it there. But we can't necessarily complete that triangle of confidentiality, integrity, and particularly availability across the commercial networks. And equally, the private radio has its issues too. The radio that we've got at the moment is reaching end of life, so are commercial products as well. And the spectrum that we use at the moment can't meet the demands that we need to put on those data transfers. Securing data does introduce overheads into the data. We need more bandwidth to secure the data properly and make sure it arrives from A to B in the way we want it to arrive. So, in summary, what I'm really saying is we do not want to remove our options. We don't want to wholly rely on commercial networks. Fibre optics, perfect if we could get fibre optics to all of our endpoints, but we can't. The case has already been said. It's too costly to put in that fibre optics and cables everywhere. So private radio has some great benefits. It means we're in control. It means we know where that data's going. It means we know who's got access to that data every point along the route, and we know how we're going to make that data available. So, for example, we know the level of power backup, for example, we need. Back to that availability, power backup and availability do fit into cybersecurity, because you haven't got information security without that availability. So, in summarising, to meet that unprecedented demand for data, we need to make sure that we plan with secure communications at the heart of everything we roll out. And as such, cybersecurity has got to play a vital role in achieving that net zero target. And that's it. So any questions?
I know we're probably fractionally behind the schedule, but we've been doing Q&As as we go along. So has anybody got any questions they want to ask Phil on this subject? It's fresh in their minds. Get away with this.
Nobody ever asks questions about cybersecurity.
No,
Let's go on.
You have the microphone. You have the microphone. You can always ask the first question if you really want to. So thank you for the presentation, Phil. It's just a very quick question, actually. Although just before I ask the question, I did
did remind me, actually, I saw a piece on the radio the other day that they had the head of NCSC talking about current threats and things like that. And the bit I found quite interesting and amusing was that she was talking about some of the criminal gangs that are responsible for ransomware are so sophisticated that they now have 24-hour helplines for those victims that have trouble paying. Actually, so that was great. Anyway, my question was, just a quick takeaway from your presentation, and in particular that last slide. So can we assume that from the point of view of cybersecurity, the choice between, say, commercial public mobile networks and private radio, you are largely agnostic from a cybersecurity perspective? Is that true?
Not necessarily. So it's very similar to the operational requirement, the cybersecurity requirement. We find it difficult to put our requirements commercially into a contract with a comms provider. So are we actually going to get assurances about the integrity of that data? Are we going to get assurances over the confidentiality, where it's routed? We've always found that difficult. So I wouldn't say agnostic. I would not. I think you've got to risk assess the data. How important is it to your operation? And choose there, but I would certainly choose private radio for that most mission critical data, because that's the only real way that you can absolutely guarantee the CIA of that information.
Thank you. We've got time for probably one more question, if anybody's got one. If not, we'll move on to the next presentation.
I nearly got away.
What's your thoughts on the more recent attacks that have been on the periphery system? I'm thinking about particularly the one about solar winds last year, which was quite an interesting attack vector.
It was, yeah. So the solar winds attack, just to summarise, was interesting. It was infiltrating people's supply chain. So solar winds is, if you don't know, is a piece of software that's used by tens of thousands of companies around the world to monitor their networks. The clever thing about that, if I admire cyber attacks, is network monitoring tools by implication usually have administrative and privileged access to every single system on your network, and it involved infiltrating solar winds at source. So people, the deployment model was great for the attacker, because people downloaded it from SolarWinds website, updated their software, and made it vulnerable. So I think you're opening up there the wider issue of supply chain management. So how can we be confident in our supply chains? How can we provide assurances to supply chains? Comms providers come into that category. How do we contract? How do we make sure we put those that security into everything we do? And that's a really difficult challenge. Even after we put it into our contract, it's how do we assure ourselves? And that's something we're working together as an industry with government to start to address how we manage supply chains. How do we accredit suppliers to make sure that we know when we install their equipment or when we use their services on our networks that we can rely that they maintain a certain standard of security. So it's a big, wide question, that, but a good question. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Phil.
Okay.
There you go. That's great. Thank you very much.